Um, so I'm Corey Gleed, a clinical psychologist. I'm in New York City, and Anna and I started our Type C project together. Anna, do you want to introduce yourself and say a little bit more? And then I think we should actually chat a little bit about what we were going to talk about before.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Anna White. I was an investments executive for many years. I struggled with severe burnout and kind of went on a journey of self-reflection on why that happened and why my health was just at rock bottom. And I kind of came across this notion of the type C personality, which I didn't really have an understanding of. I'd never heard of it before. And just for everyone out there who's not familiar with the type C personality, here's kind of a rundown of what we're like. So we're excessively conscientious, overly responsible. We avoid conflict at all costs. We tend to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. We take on other people's problems. We have a hard time setting boundaries. We're perfectly pleasant all the time. And we're really sort of notorious for not being aware of our own needs and burying them, as well as burying difficult emotions. So Corey and I decided, as longtime friends, that we would make something out of this type C personality that most people haven't heard of. But it has so many really interesting implications for time awareness and time management. And I know, Corey, we were just going to talk a little bit about our own struggles with time management. So I'll start. I'm better now. But in my very dark type C days, I was giving all of my time and all of my energy to everyone else, specifically at work, more at work than at home, but just giving, and not being really aware and intentional with time at all. So when I read some of the rules of your book, I thought, oh my gosh, wow, this is really relevant for type C people because we're operating in a pattern of just saying yes by default to anything that is asked of us. And we are very rarely intentional with our time.
So I actually am a obsessed fan of the podcast Psychologist Off the Clock. And I want to say that several years ago, I think, I was listening. First of all, I'm also behind on all the episodes. So I was listening to the episode that you did with them, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, wow, this is so obvious and something that I definitely have not thought about. What am I doing with my time? What am I recognizing that I say I don't have the time for, which is not true. And so I started looking into you and reading a little bit about your recommendations. And I said, it was during the time that Anna and I started our Type C project. And I said, oh my gosh, we really need to talk about this. It's so interesting to me because I think I'm do not struggle with Type C traits at work, but I definitely can get caught in not really thinking about how I'm using my time productively for myself or just in a useful way at home. And that's exactly why we thought it would be so helpful because our audience, it really struggles with thinking about time, thinking about being mindful of time, and certainly making themselves a priority. So obviously we're going to launch into talking a lot about this, but first we would just love to hear a little bit about you. Obviously people that have tuned in from your audience know you, but we'd love for you to just introduce yourself before we get going with talking a little bit more in detail about time
Yeah,
chips.
sure. Well, I'm Laura. I write about time management and productivity. I tend to write about it from the perspective that I do believe we have enough time to do the things that are important to us, both professionally and personally. Because, there are many people in the world who are doing amazing things and they don't have any more time than the rest of us. So we need to figure out how we can learn from people who are doing a lot with their time and what we can do to maybe take some tips from their lives and put them into our own in a way that works for us. I've been studying and writing about this for more than 15 years now. I've written several books, including Tranquility by Tuesday, Off the Clock, I Know How She Does It, 168 Hours. And yeah, I live outside Philadelphia with my husband and 5 kids. So that's my life.
I'm sure it's really calm and just easy breezy every day.
Every day. We have totally smooth running machine all the
I'm
time.
sure. So Laura, we'd love to just start off by asking a little bit about your background and how did this field and area become something that you are so passionate about? How did time management and time awareness become something that you decided I got to do something about this?
Yeah. Well, I think first I mean, just a naturally fascinating topic because, as I said, we all do have the same amount of time. I mean, there are people who are richer, smarter, better looking than the rest of us, but nobody has more time. Like everybody has 24 hours in a day, and they may have resources that we don't have, but still, there are things that all of us have to do: sleep, eat, whatever else. We can learn things from each other in a way that, I don't know, a billionaire's money management techniques are probably of zero help to me, but maybe that person is doing something with their time that might be of interest. So I find that part cool. But I think also I'm drawn to this topic because I think a lot of the conventional wisdom is not supported by the data because a lot of people have not actually kept track of their time. Like they do not know where the time goes. And so it is easy to tell ourselves stories about where our time goes that may not be 100% accurate. So anytime we are saying something, and I just want to call out here when we talked about this a little bit earlier, we said all my time went to other people. That's probably not true. It was probably not 100%. Now it was probably more than you wanted, right? And it was probably led you to feel that there wasn't enough time for your own priorities, and that is 100% true. But it probably wasn't all your time, right? And so I think by knowing where the time goes, we can make just we can make tweaks that work, right? Like, so if somebody says like I have no free time whatsoever, and then they're like, well, okay, if I track my time, I see I have some, but it's not as much as I want. So what can I do with that? Are there places I can scale this up? Are there places I can, make different choices and choose things that are more rejuvenating? And when we see that, we can make a real difference in our lives. So that's what I'm always trying to get people to work from.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of type C people like me in your work who are just really struggling with setting boundaries around their time? And I mean, I know time tracking is a big part of your protocol, but just how do you help these people? How do you help them to even maybe take the time to start tracking their time?
Yeah. I promise it is not that onerous. It is really pretty simple to do. I've been tracking my time for almost 10 years now, and it only takes me about 3 minutes a day. So it's not that bad. And so I suggest that people try it. You will probably be able to figure out some things about your lives, and you might see that, like, oh yes, this project is taking more time than I want, or oh, I see that when I am at home, I tend to be responding to things as opposed to choosing what I would like to do with my time. So yeah, I definitely see people have trouble with boundaries. And I think, we're never going to change our lives completely overnight. And there are also some good reasons that, we want to deal with the rest of humanity. I mean, somebody who had completely, you know, unpermeable boundaries would be impossible to work with for anyone. So there's some upsides to every personality. Um, but you might be able to say, okay, like I'm not going to suddenly be spending 24 hours a day on the things that I think matter, but could I scale this up to maybe 30 more minutes a day? Like, could I find 30 minutes in the course of my workday to focus on a project that I personally want to do and then deal with my interruptions after that? How about on the home front? Could I take 30 minutes for something that I really want to do? And then, I'll deal with everyone else's problems outside of that. And I bet, probably most people could make that work most days. And once you start seeing how that feels and how that makes life more exciting, you would probably be able to scale it up a little bit more over time.
So I have a question. I'm gonna be tough, right? So people with type C, although they are excessively nice and really want to be helpful, they might also say things like, I don't have the time for self-care. I feel like I have to make sure I do everything for everyone else first. And also I feel anxious or uncomfortable when I'm not productive. They're often very busy people. What recommendations would you have for those challenges?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna be a little tough here too, because for the vast majority of us, the world will go on spinning no matter what you do, right? And so if you don't do something, it is not that everyone's life is going to fall apart. I mean, if you were suddenly taken out of the equation, everybody would figure out something else, right? And that is sometimes a hard thing to realize
Yeah.
because we do want to feel important and we want to feel needed. And I think sometimes when people have that mindset of like, oh, I have to do all this stuff for everyone, I have to do this, it's because we want to feel like we are so needed and that nobody could survive without us. But it probably isn't true, even in some very tough circumstances. So once you have that thought in mind, you're like, well, okay, if it is true that other people would figure out something in my absence, can I slowly start to make a few changes? Can I put a tiny boundary around something? Let me try it. If everything falls apart, well, okay. But if everything doesn't fall apart, now we have some evidence. So I think we want to take baby steps, but we have to change our mindset from the beginning. But it's liberating. Like when I realized like I could go join choirs, like I could go sing in the evening because like yeah, maybe my other half isn't necessarily putting the children to bed at the exact moment and in the exact way that I would, but eventually everyone is going to go to sleep. So, the world will keep on spinning.
I loved your point that you made when you said that people sometimes have strong reactions to applying your time management rules. And if that's the case, then it's really important to explore why. And I think for type C people, we have a strong reaction because it's like, oh, I can't disappoint someone or I can't let someone down. And so I have to give this part of myself to this person because that is not available to me to just simply, take this time for myself and not do for them. So I'm just really curious about how you've like helped people explore those kind of strong reactions and maybe respond differently. I mean, kind of in line with what you were just saying, but
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I definitely think that a strong reaction is important. Like if somebody tells me that their favorite pie is blueberry pie, I don't care, right? Like that's not, of anything to me. But there are other things that people say, that like, oh, everybody knows that you can't work full time and spend time with your family or something. And that sets me off, right? And it's like, but why is that? It's because it matters to me. Like I think that's getting at something that I truly don't think is the case, and so I want to, have a big reaction to it. And sometimes it is that there are reasons for things, but then other times the reason we're having a strong reaction is because it's touching something that we are wondering about, and we've just decided to sort of shut that down. And so I particularly did get that reaction when I suggest that people try taking one night for you. This is one of my rules, my time management rules. Every busy person needs one night a week, or early morning or we'll spot on the weekend, whatever, but some point of time where you do something that is not work and is not caring for family members. And ideally, it is something that involves a commitment, like getting outside the house, seeing other people. They're expecting you to be there. And people are sometimes like, well, I can't do that. I can't go, sing in this choir. I can't go join a pickleball league that I want to join because I'm so busy with work and family. It's getting at that thing. Everything will fall apart if I am not there. I mean, and people have sort of ridiculous reasons. Like somebody who told me she couldn't do this was like, well, we have a cleaning schedule. So if I go out on Tuesday nights and join the pickleball league, the the house won't get vacuumed or whatever it was. I'm like, well, okay, there's so many ways we could get around this. Like, maybe you just vacuum on Mondays instead, like, or somebody else vacuums on Tuesdays, or you do it less often. I don't know. There are many ways that we can solve this problem, but we come up with these excuses in order to keep ourselves in certain mindsets that are
I
comfortable.
know for me, I had this need to sort of be home and available for my children in the evenings, even though they are now a senior and a sophomore in high school. And I just felt like, oh, I need to be around. They need a parent to be here. And my husband and I started going to this hip hop class on Wednesday nights. And you just quickly realize like, they don't need me. They're
No,
fine.
they're
they're,
fine.
they're
They
happy.
may not
Like,
have even
go.
noticed you were
No,
gone.
no,
Like,
they didn't notice we were gone.
yes,
They're like, oh, where'd you go? Oh, okay.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway.
No, I totally get that. But even if they did notice you were gone, and some people do get a little bit of pushback from some teenagers are different from other teenagers. The point is, you're probably still there 6 other nights a week. Like, why are we looking at the one night where it's in conflict versus saying, okay, I've got one night out, and then the other 6 I'm around. If they want to have that deep thought, share it with me. I'm totally there on Wednesday. I mean, on Thursday. I'm just not there on Wednesday, and so hopefully they can start, pushing those deep thoughts to Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday.
So obviously we cannot go through all the strategies in all of your books in a short Insta Live, but what do you feel like are some of the key strategies that what's a great way to get started? What would you suggest? What are some 2 or 3 things that you recommend people to start doing that feel just to get going with time awareness and starting to make these changes?
Yeah, well, the first thing I always suggest is tracking your time for a week. I mean, you really want to see where the time goes. And even if you do have a lot of responsibilities, there is probably some discretionary time somewhere. And when you see that, you can start saying, well, what do I want to do with it? What would I like? Another thing I always recommend is having a designated weekly planning time. And this is when you figure out what is most important to you over the next week. And ideally, you figure this out in 3 categories: career, relationships, and self. And when you make a 3 category list for the upcoming week, the upside is that nobody ever makes a 3 category list and then leaves a category blank. They're like, well, I have to put something in each category. That's like the nature of categories, right? So you'll put something in all 3 of them. And that's great, because then you're like, okay, well, now I have this thing on my list that I have to do. And we're very accountable to something like that. But then you look over the next week and see where it can go. Figure out, well, okay, let's say I do want to start going to that hip hop class. How can I make that work? What are the logistics that have to happen? And then you check back in the next week, because we do this week after week, and we say, well, okay, did I do my priorities this week? If I did, awesome, let's celebrate. If I didn't, what happened? Right? What was it that was preventing me? Was that a real reason, or is it something that I could have done something about? And then we iterate and we try again, and week after week, this usually does start to see results.
What about your concept? I love your concept of effortful fun before effortless fun, because I think type C people can get stuck into, like, fall into effortless fun because we feel so burnout a lot of times. So maybe just like talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting point too, because people who claim that they have no time for themselves do in fact spend hours online daily, like looking at stuff. I'm like, well, that's leisure time. It just felt like you could have done something else, and so it's less of a, like, obvious sign in the air saying, hello, I'm experiencing leisure time right now. And so it sticks with that story we have about ourselves, that we have no time for anything. So I challenge people to take a look at that. But with that, if you have time to scroll around online, even if it's just for a couple minutes here and there, then you have time for other sorts of leisure. There are all sorts of kinds of leisure that people say, I'd love to spend more time doing X if only I had the time. And these are often things like reading, calling friends, doing hobbies. That's what I call effortful fun. This is fun that requires a little bit of intention and effort, maybe planning. And so it's always easier to do the effortless fun of scrolling around online, or maybe it's watching Netflix, or whatever your passive leisure happens to be. And I'm not saying don't do the passive leisure, because, like, hello, I'm here on Instagram right now. So, like, welcome everybody. I'm glad you're here. Like, I'm glad you haven't decided to completely cut it out of your life. But you might want to put in a little bit of effortful fun before effortless fun. So when you've got a bit of time, I don't know, you're waiting in line, you're waiting for the carpool to bring your kids home for soccer, do the effortful fun for just a few minutes first. So read that book for 3 minutes, and then you can go be on Instagram all you want. Or, call a friend just to check in, say hi for 5 minutes. They're like, I got to be out in 5 minutes. I just wanted to see how you're doing. And then, go watch Netflix for hours if you want. But at least that way you've gotten both kinds of fun. And you might stick with the effortful fun, right? Like, it's fun. So you might actually decide to keep going. But even if you don't, then you will have gotten both kinds.
I love, because I think that people with type C can get so focused on the things that they have to do and not really scale it back, think about what is important and what is meaningful to me. I actually, the New York Times had this awesome article a couple of years ago that I read about the 10-minute conversation. And, I would often get stuck in thinking, oh, I have to call that friend. I haven't talked to them in so long, and thinking, but I don't have the time for that because it's going to be a long conversation. And this was so great because they basically said, which was easy for me to do. Hey, just say at the beginning of the conversation, I only have 10 minutes, but I just wanted to catch up quickly. And it's funny because my sister will do this a lot. She'll say, well, if I pick up the phone, she'll say, I only have 5 minutes, but that's great because it sets the expectation. And you can get through so much conversation in 10 minutes. 10 minutes is actually a really long time. So anyway, that was something that I was thinking about. But I really just love the concept of what is important this week to me, career, personal, all those things versus what do I have to do. So I just wanted to go back for people that haven't read your books. How do you actually go about logging your time? Like, what are your recommendations for how you actually do this?
Yeah, so I mean, there's lots of ways you could do it. I use weekly spreadsheets. It has the days of the week across the top, Monday to Sunday, half-hour blocks down the left-hand side, 5 a.m. to 4:30 a.m. So that is 336 cells representing the 168-hour week. I just check in 3 times a day, usually write down what I've done since the last time I checked in. And I use broad categories. It'd be like work, sleep, drove, kids, etc. Kids, etc. is kind of a broad, like I'm chasing random people around, dealing with random stuff. But and a lot of people are not used to describing time in words, so that's hard for the first few days. But then you develop your systems and you figure it out. So that's one way to do it. You can obviously use one of dozens of time tracking apps that are on the market, or you can also just write down what you're doing, like in sentence form. Check in a couple times a day and write it in a notebook. Like write what you've done since the last time. I like this spreadsheet because it's more orderly, and I can sort of see the whole week on a page, which is harder if it's in narrative form. But it's totally up to you. It's whatever you're going to stick with.
Another concept that I loved from your book is this big adventure, little adventure. And again, type C people not taking enough time for fun. But I just thought that was such a novel concept around planning something that's going to be memorable and different and shake you out of your routine and probably very, very inspiring, right? If you're just getting out and doing something new. So maybe we could just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so much time just passes and we don't remember where it went because we're doing the same things that we always do. It's novelty and intensity that tends to make memories, which is one reason, and that tends to make actually time feel like it's moving more slowly. Like if you think about when you're traveling somewhere exotic, it can feel like, 2 weeks have passed by lunchtime because everything's new and your brain doesn't know what it needs to remember. So it's kind of holding on to all of it. Whereas obviously a normal day has no resemblance to that whatsoever. But we can make normal life more interesting by building in one big adventure and one little adventure each week. And by big adventure, I mean something that's a couple hours, like 4 hours, half a weekend day. A little adventure can be less than an hour, as long as it is something out of the ordinary. And I think this is a really good cadence, like one big adventure, one little adventure each week, because it's enough to make the week more interesting. Like, oh, that was the week we went to the beach. That was the week we went to the science museum. That was the week, we went out to the new gelato place. But it's not enough to disrupt anyone's good routines and good cadences that they already have. I'm not asking people to sail like a Viking around the Norwegian fjords every week. Like this is not happening. But these are things we can fit into our normal lives. And so yeah, try that, and I think you'll find that life feels more fun. You have things you can talk about with people. They're like, "What did you do this weekend?" It's like, I can tell you, I have something to this. So even your small talk becomes more interesting and not like so tedious. Um, and yet you feel like life is not just completely passing you by. It's more exciting. It's memorable. We have memories. We don't say where did the time go when you know where the time went.
I think this is so important for everyone, and especially for people with type C who definitely, I think, can, get stuck with anger, resentment. So trying to do something that takes you out of that and is different. So this has been such an amazing talk. Before we wrap up, just want to ask a couple of quick more questions. So obviously, you listed off your books, and we will put that also in some of the notes. But I just wanted to ask you, in addition to your books, do you have any other books that you really recommend that you think would be really helpful for people who struggle with type C traits and paying attention to their time?
Yeah, well, one that's a little bit different that people might enjoy, Tara Moore's Playing Big. I don't know if you've read that,
No.
but it's about thinking about how you can expand your influence. And so that often involves doing bigger things and taking bigger risks and getting outside your comfort zone. And she has whole sections on unhooking yourself from either criticism or praise, because none of it's all just feedback, right? And it doesn't matter. You're always disappointing someone. The question is, are you meeting the needs of the people who you are trying to put this thing out in the world to meet their needs, right? And that's the only thing that truly matters. So I think that might be a good one for people who are looking to think a little bit differently about what they can do in their lives.
Oh, I love that. That's not one that we've heard of before. So, what's her background, Tara Moore? Do you know?
I don't really know, actually.
Okay. All right.
I don't know at all, but
That's
I
a good
know
one.
she's done a lot of like workshops on this topic over the years that people have
Yeah.
found helpful.
We
Yeah.
love to ask everyone we interview just about your own self-care routines, what you do that's fun and restorative. You mentioned singing in a choir, which sounds amazing. And I'd also just love if you have any little big or little adventure, examples of what you've done, especially the little ones, because that's where I think that would make such a big difference. Just give people some inspiration.
Yeah. No, I love singing in choir. That's my night for me, that I do. Um, but little adventures, I challenge myself every couple of weeks to do something that, like, I might go walk in a different place or run in a different place. We have a botanical garden that's really only about 20 minutes from us. That's really a lovely one. And so, through spring, summer, and fall, it's pretty easy to take, as a longer lunch. I will get the car, go there, walk around, come back. And, I could do the whole thing in an hour and 15 minutes or so, if it's only like a 30-40 minute walk. But it just, you come back completely different having seen something so beautiful in the middle of a work day. So yeah,
I love
I try to
that.
take advantage of my flexibility when I can.
Hmm.
So, any upcoming books that we should know about, or any upcoming projects that we should know about? And then also, we just love to hear a little bit about where can people find you, your website, what's your Instagram, things like that.
Yeah. Well, I am working on a book. It won't be out till next spring, but it is tentatively called Big Time. And the hook of it, as I'm telling people, is how to fall in love with your schedule. So I'm hoping that everyone will fall in love with their schedule after reading this book. You can find me. My website is lauravanderkam.com. Here on Instagram, I'm at @lvanderkam, and don't post too frequently, but I always love to interact with people when I do.
We've had a lot of people just join in kind of late in the game here. So, just to everybody who's on, we are going to turn this into a podcast episode. Our podcast is called The Type C Personality. So, it'll probably be ready in about a week or so, maybe shorter. We'll see. But you didn't miss anything because it's all going to be out there. And we usually summarize our conversations on our blog. So that's more of just like a quick hit. But Laura, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I think that these tips are so important for our audience. So hopefully people will get out there and take a look at some of your books. So we really appreciate
Nope.
your time.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.